Hi, everyone. Welcome to today's Hinckley Forum. My name is Nicholas Cockrell, the Managing Director of Community Engagement here at the Hinckley Institute. Thank you all again for joining us for this special event. The Hinckley Institute is a nonpartisan institute at the University of Utah. The Hinckley provides an array of transformative experiences for students through internships, forums, and classes. Hinckley forums seek to foster public discourse and civil debate on the most current and pressing issues, bringing in local, national, and international thought leaders. Today's forum, is a conversation with Ambassador Oksana Markarova. We want to thank the World Trade Center Utah for their leadership in organizing this forum, and we also want to recognize the other Ukrainian officials and World Trade Center officials in the room with us today. Ambassador Markarova has served as Ambassador of Ukraine to the United States since February 2021, Permanent Observer of Ukraine to the Organization of American States since May 2021, and Ambassador of Ukraine to Antigua and Barbuda since July 2023. Before she arrived in Washington, D.C., she served as Ukraine's Ministry of Finance from 2015 to 2020 as First Deputy Minister and Government Commissioner on Investments, and then since 2018 as Minister of Finance. Prior to her career in public service, the ambassador spent 17 years working in private equity and financial advisory, having leadership roles in ITT Investment Group, Western NIS Enterprise Fund, Chemonics, and the World Bank, as well as founded Archidata startup electronic archive company in between service positions in 2020. Ambassador Markarova serves on the boards of the Ukraine House DC Foundation in Washington, the Ukrainian Development Foundation, and supports Ukrainian Catholic University and Ukrainian Press Museum Archive. Today's conversation will be led by Mr. Jonathan Friedman, Chief Executive Officer and President of World Trade Center Utah. He'll kick us off, but please first join me in welcoming our guests.
Well, thank you. It's wonderful to be with you, and I'm so honored to be joined up here by Ambassador Oksana Markarova. Her Excellency, as was mentioned, has extensive experience in the Ukrainian government. Before this, serving as the finance minister for Ukraine. She's been in private equity for 17 years. Prior to that, very, very bright and capable ambassador from Ukraine. It's worth noting that President Zelensky has chosen Ambassador Markarova as his special envoy to the United States, which is a big responsibility during wartime, during a period of war. So anyway, we're here to have a discussion. We want to take your questions as well, so please be thinking of those. In addition to my role at World Trade Center Utah, I've served for the last 16 years as an honorary consul for Ukraine here in the state of Utah. So I run the consulate office here for this within the state. We work with Ukrainian nationals that are here. We work on fostering economic development opportunities between Ukraine and Utah, have cultural exchanges, and of course we host visiting diplomats and dignitaries. So it's wonderful to have you here.
Oh, it's great to be here. It's always so good to be back to school, and something that you guys take for granted. But these are the best years of life when you learn and everything is open in front of you. So I'm so glad to be, of course, this is my first visit to Utah ever. And I feel myself home here. So thank you, Jonathan, for your exceptional work as an honorary consul. And I'm glad to be here with my team, with our general counsel, with my fellow diplomat from the Ukrainian embassy. But the reason why I wanted to talk to you is because nobody lives on an island anymore. And everything that happens to my country now, of course, it's existential fight for Ukraine. Russia attacked us in 2014. Russia attacked us again in 2022. And now for more than 2 years, we live in a full-fledged war, something that I really hope you will only learn from textbooks, something that I thought I would only see in textbooks when I learned about the World War II and how all of us have to do everything possible to prevent wars like this or to prevent wars and not to be living in a full-fledged war. And just to share with you how difficult it is, but at the same time, how this is so important for all of us to learn about it and understand it and do everything possible, and in my job sometimes impossible, to get to just and lasting peace, because it's so important for Ukraine. Of course, it's existential for us. If we will not defend our homes, our loved ones, if we will not restore our territorial integrity and sovereignty, if we will not win in this fight, and Ukraine is in that fight not just during the last 2 years, and even not only during the last 10 years since Russia attacked us the first time, because this is our struggle for our independence against occupation, which happened to us as early as 1708, when Peter the Great, then Russian Tsar, occupied Ukraine. We lost the Battle of Poltava together with Swedes, and we lost our independence. And ever since then, generations of Ukrainians fought for our independence. This is our anti-colonial war. This is our war to be who we want to be, just Ukrainians, speak our own language, live like we want to live, elect our own government officials, change them on a regular basis. And generations of Ukrainians fought for it peacefully. And then we received our independence in 1991, when 92% of Ukrainians everywhere in Ukraine, in Crimea, in Donetsk, in Lugansk, in Lviv, everywhere, south, east, voted to be independent. And Ukraine in those borders was recognized by everyone, including Russia. And when Ukraine in 1994, I don't know how many of you know, but we had the third largest nuclear arsenal. And we gave it up voluntarily in exchange of the guarantees that we will not be attacked. And we were attacked by the very country that put a signature under the document. So it's, for us, it's a make it or break it point. It's whether we will have home and whether we will be alive. And unfortunately, you all saw during these 2 years what happens in those areas which were occupied by Russia. In Bucha, which is my hometown. I live in Vorzel, which is the administratively part of Bucha, the northernmost part of it, for 33 days. Horrible war crimes, killed civilians, children. We've seen the same in Izium, we've seen the same in Kherson. Unfortunately, Mariupol, a large city which is still occupied, 400,000 people that lived there before the war, is still occupied and destroyed. Some cities like Bakhmut and Avdiivka, which you probably never heard about before the news from the war in Ukraine, are completely destroyed. 40,000, 50,000 people live there. So for us, clearly, it's a war in which we have only one option. We didn't choose this war. It was a war of choice for Russia. But we will defend our home, and we will hope that US and other friends and allies will stand with us until we win. But it's also a very important war for all of us to win, for the US. Because by attacking us, and by attacking Georgia before, and by attacking other countries, Russia not only violated our borders, but also violated the international rules and norms which were put in place after the World War II to actually assure that countries which are peaceful will not be invaded or violated by their neighbors. And the implications of how this will end will have an implication, result for all of us, whether we will live in the rules-based. And look, I know it's not an ideal world. And it's not the only war or conflict started by aggressive people or by terrorists. And it's not the only horrible loss of lives. But this is a member of the Security Council of UN, a nuclear power, that pledged not to do it when we gave up the nuclear weapons, which is doing it against all the condemnation, against all the rulings of the courts, against ICC indicting Mr. Putin. So, it's very important for all of us to understand in order to not only to win this war, but to deter and prevent other wars. And also to fight for values and principles, to understand how important it is. It's not easy. In your professional careers, many times you will face a choice between making the decision which is making the right decision, which might be uncomfortable, which might cost you friends or career sometimes, or making a decision which will promote you, but not something that your heart and your soul tells you to do. And this war and the disruption of food security and the disruption of weaponizing of everything, but not only Russia, but those who help them, Iran, North Korea, teaches us that we have to return to making the right decisions, regardless of how difficult they are. Because if we want to build a better place, and our generation to give you a better place to live, your generation to your future kids, which seems like a very distant future, but here I am. I feel like I was just in my university like you, and now I'm a grandmother. So we just have to do it, and we just have to fight for what is right, even during the peace times. Fight for democracy, fight for the right thing to do, and support each other. So thank you for having me here. I look forward to our discussion. I look forward to your questions. I always get the toughest questions when I speak to students, to be honest, and I love it.
There's broad support for Ukraine in Utah, and I frequently get asked, what can I do? You have a room full of university students here that are probably thinking the same thing. How can they get involved? How can they help? How would you respond to that?
There is so much you can do. From connecting and reaching out to Ukrainians who are here and learning from them, helping them, including them into some of your activities, to getting on the website of the embassy and seeing what initiatives you can join. We are focusing a lot with, again, Jonathan and the team on what we call the people-to-people diplomacy, putting together cooperation between state and the oblast in Ukraine, sister cities, but also going even deeper, university to university, school to school, hospital to hospital. And I'm very excited to be working, and hopefully soon we will have a more advanced cooperation between your university and some universities in Kyiv or other places in Ukraine. Please join these initiatives and be part of them. Also, when we have, and Jonathan probably travels to Ukraine now more often than I do, because I can only travel if President Biden or Secretary Blinken goes to Ukraine, or if my president needs me to come to Ukraine. But there are so many trips to Ukraine, and I know it's a war zone, but we found how relatively safe, but thanks God, all of the trips were safe so far. People going there. So if you would be interested in that, please contact Jonathan on the mission here. The Trade Center is organizing a lot. If you would like to be part of that, or to be virtually part of some initiatives in Ukraine, we would be more than happy to connect you. Now, putting a Ukrainian flag outside of your house or dorm is very important. It sends very important signal to politicians that you do support it, or reaching out to your congressmen and to your senators and letting them know when you support Ukraine that you support this fight and why. So whatever you would like to do, we really appreciate all of that. And just be active. The slogan of the school I saw is to teach students respect for practical politics and principle of citizens' involvement. Be involved in any way possible. Because again, it's important for American national security. If God forbid we fall, and we don't intend to fall, we hope our friends will stay with us, and we will stop Putin while it's still in Ukraine. And you all learned about the World War II. It's so much 1939 moment. So many books have been written after the victory in World War II that, oh my God, I wish we have stopped Hitler when it was clear that he was saying it like Putin is saying. It's not just about Ukraine. He's threatening Poland. He's threatening Baltic states. He's threatening Finland and Sweden. He's threatening Germany sometimes. We have to stop him while it's still in Ukraine, because we still do not require other countries to fight for us. We have enough Ukrainians who are willing and capable to defend our homes, but we need weapons and we need support. But if, God forbid, we fall and the next country he attacks is the NATO country, it's a much larger war in which all NATO allies will be forced to adhere to the principle of what Article 5 of NATO says, attack against one is attack against all. And it's going to be much more expensive, and it's going to be much more difficult. and American boys and girls like you will have to fight that fight instead of being here at the university. So be involved, be active, ask questions, learn more, travel to Ukraine if you're willing to do that, and we would be more than happy to organize it, or just connect with Ukraine online, and again, we would be happy to facilitate that.
Great. How do you respond to those that say that Washington is sending just enough support to Ukraine to kind of keep Ukraine afloat, but not enough to win the war?
Look, on the one hand, we understand, thanks God, US is not on a war footing, and we hope you will never be. You know, 2 years ago when Russia attacked us, and the majority of people looked at the map and compared the number of people and number of resources and capabilities and weapons and everything else, even people who supported us, even people who understood that it's such an unprovoked, unjustified, unfair, aggressive attack against us, had really difficult times believing that we will be where we are today. People thought we would fall in 3 days, 10 days. Literally, people in Washington, D.C. were asking me how soon the new ambassador will be sent if Russians take over Kyiv. And we knew we would not give up and we would not surrender. We were saying that. But I understand why that whole, you know, I would even call it propaganda from Russia, whether it was Soviet Union or Russian Empire or Russian Federation now, changed the way so many, even in the collective West, looked at our region. People did not know a lot about Ukraine, about our history. I remember in 1991, when I arrived in Indiana to do my master's, when I would respond to people that I'm from Ukraine, people would say, where is it? Is it Russia? That's people who knew about. Is it Russia? Is it, some people would say that former Soviet Union. People did not know that in 1918, Ukrainian Republic was independent. We fought together with Finland to be independent, and we became independent in the same year. It's just that Finns protected their independence. We fell in 1921. People didn't know the most famous carol, Christmas carol, Carol of the Bell. You probably all know it. Do you know that it's Ukrainian song? Some of you do, some don't. It's a Ukrainian song called Щедрик. And actually the reason why I talk about it is it's a part of diplomatic efforts. In 1918, a young Ukrainian republic, there was no Twitter, no nothing. Of course, how do you tell the world about the fact that we became independent in addition to the official cables and news? The government in Ukraine decided to send a choir with beautiful Ukrainian music to share this as the culture and talk about Ukrainian new republic. They had great tour in the European countries. It actually led to France recognizing the independence of Ukraine. Then they moved to the United States. When they were in the United States, we already were occupied by the Soviet Union. And the choir had nowhere to come back to. And the author of Щедрик was actually killed by the KGB in his house, was shot by the KGB agent. And here, another author wrote English lyrics. And it was first performed in 1921 in Carnegie Hall in New York. And it became popular as Carol of the Bell. But for us, it's a symbol of our culture. It's everyone in Ukraine loves the song, of course, but we sing it with Ukrainian lyrics. And also the sign of the lost independence in the previous century. So, you know, it's this lack of knowledge, but also very massive propaganda led to misunderstanding, or not understanding sometimes, the true history of the region, why Ukraine and Poland and some other countries are actually older than Russia. You know, because when Kievan Rus was already a vibrant state, you know, Russia was not even called Russia yet. But of course, what is the common saying? The winner takes it all, right, and rewrites history. That's what happened to us. So we have to also tell a lot and learn a lot and explain a lot. And that actually, these lessons learned are very useful also. They help everyone to understand. So for example, it's not only our friends here who doubted whether we can stay the course and survive, but Russia miscalculated. I'm sure when Putin made the decision to invade, he also thought that he would win over Ukraine very quickly. And the reason why they thought it, we looked at the universities in Soviet Union and Russian Federation. They had faculties in foreign relations schools on pretty much every region and country except for us. There was no Ukrainian faculty. They never studied us. They truly thought we are not a separate nation, and that's why they miscalculated so much how Ukrainians will fight for it. So it's a long process of decolonization for us and telling our true story and sharing our culture, our ballet, our literature, which is by no means smaller and sometimes even older than the Russian history or culture, which many more people knew because they always had resources, and there was a very organized push to actually study.
I lived in Ukraine and I experienced the culture and absolutely fell in love with it. And it's heartbreaking to think that there's an effort to erase that. You think of what it would be like if this were happening in America, and you think of the whole eastern seaboard, being under attack and being destroyed essentially and occupied, and someone saying, or the world saying, well, come on, you should sign a treaty and give up Florida and Georgia and just be done with it. Come on, let's have peace. What do you see as a path? What's the path for peace? What's the end game? We can't guess what's in Putin's mind, but what does the president say?
First of all, Ukrainians are very peaceful. We never intended to attack Russia. I mean, that's nonsense. And if you look at the map, you kind of guess that, we only wanted to live in our country within our borders very peacefully, as I said. And we were never a threat to Russia if, of course, our decision to be independent, European, democratic is not a threat. But even when they attacked us the first time, we tried to resolve it through diplomatic solution. We signed 20 peace agreements with them, 20 between 2014 and 2022. We tried to implement not really fair Minsk Accords, which as the ceasefire accords, and try to restore our territorial integrity. Remember, they have taken Crimea and parts of Donetsk and Lugansk from us, and we spent 8 years negotiating 200 rounds of different discussions on how to reintegrate them through peaceful solutions, how to use diplomacy only. And we focus on developing our country, but only diplomacy. So we tried that route, and Russia used that only as an operational pause to prepare for the larger attack. So it was never about Crimea or Donetsk and Lugansk Oblast for them. It is not now about the other 4 oblasts, which they included, as they say, definitely illegally, into the Russian Federation. And while Putin was signing these decrees to occupy them, we already liberated some of the villages and towns. But essentially, we have to understand everything that you saw from places like Bucha, the horrible tortures and killings of civilians, kidnapping of Ukrainian children, mass graves. I mean, horrible, horrible war crimes. It all happens as we speak in Mariupol. It all happens in the areas we still do not control. We returned only 382 kids out of 10,000. That's only registered cases of abducted children. Especially, out from this 380 returned, the majority are teenagers. And they shared horrifying stories, how they were put into this re-education camps, how they were told that their parents don't care about them, or their parents are dead, and sometimes it was not true. They were forced to, recite Russian state anthem and say that they are not Ukrainians, they are Russians, and forced to speak Russian. And if they would disobey or something, they would be in isolation cells and sometimes even physically. Like horrible stuff that happens now. We cannot leave these people behind. We cannot say, oh, fine, let's stop the war where it is and give up some of the territories. It's not about territories. It's about people who are there, who suffer, who want to be rescued. But also because that's not what Putin wants, It's not even on the table. Mm-hmm. Every time he says something publicly, it's how he will destroy or conquer all Ukraine. And we should believe him. He has been pretty consistent in his evil announcements of what he will do throughout his tenure as the president, although I think, given that these elections were such as sham elections, and they were also conducted on the territories which he illegally occupies, a number of countries in European Union and beyond actually do not call him, if you look at the press, they only call him a dictator, or they don't even call him a president, because that's not what free and fair elections look like. So look, again, nobody wants peace more than Ukrainians. We crave peace. We want to return to peace. We want to save as many of our Ukrainian defenders who are literally dying and defending freedom with their lives on the front line. And so many of them volunteered. So many of them are professors and teachers and students and writers and screenplayers, like Oleg Sentsov, a very famous TV screenwriter who has been abducted by Russians in Crimea, held in detentions. We were able to exchange him before the full-fledged war, and he volunteered to serve on the front line as soon as this war started. He should be making his, excellent, bright movies and getting international awards for them. But he's on the trenches now, fighting for the very existence of our country. So we want peace, but we also have all to be realists. First, we can only get this peace through strength. If we are strong, if we respond to bully with the only response is, say no, enough, and we will not surrender. But also because for all of us, if the international law is broken, we have to restore it. Because if Putin can attack Ukraine and get some territories as the result of that, what message does it send to others? That if you are strong enough, if you don't have any moral values or red lines, if you have nuclear weapons, look about that message. Ukraine is one of a very few countries that gave up nuclear weapons voluntarily, and that just sends a message that, that you have to have a nuclear weapon in order not to be attacked by others. So for all of us, we have to restore that. We have to return to the place where we can say that international law maybe not ideal, but it works, because now it doesn't. And that has implications for all continents and for all countries.
Well, I'd like to open it up to you for questions. So please, does anyone have a question for Ambassador Markarova?
Excuse me, if you have a question, I'm going to run the microphone to you, so our folks online can hear.
First, очень приятно. Добрый пожаловать,
Спасибо.
Oksana. I apologize, I don't speak Ukrainian.
That's okay.
I know Russian's not too popular language in your country right now.
I can still speak it.
I spent time in your hometown recently in Bucha. I actually stayed in a home where I found out the Russians had taken that over, and that's where some of their leaders were, which was a little creepy. I've been to the mass graves in that town. And Bakhmut that you mentioned, I'm working on bringing some from there right now.
Thank you.
And Poltava. I went to the military base in Poltava, and I apologized to them the embarrassment of our earlier Democrat president that talked them into giving up their weapons to Russia. I don't know what was in their mind to do that, but I think it's a terrible thing. And then the promise that we'd protect them. Then when the next one came along, Obama did virtually nothing to protect the stealing. I agree with you. We can't reward bad behavior. Murderous dictators, if we reward them and say, yeah, take New York, Florida, would we do that? No, I don't think we would. But that's what some people are suggesting. And I think it's terrible. We need to defeat the evil. If we reward them, it will continue, like you've said. My question is, I mean, the propaganda is terrible. And it's, we have a propaganda problem here and a budget problem. And we have corruption in Ukraine. We had a vice president that bribed to get out of corruption there with $1 billion. He brags about it. He's now our president, and he doesn't open up about where the money's going to Ukraine. So there's turning a tide against spending money on Ukraine. I think it's partly because of mistrust for how our president is doing the extreme spending. We need to support Ukraine, but we need to have openness. And I just talked to a congressman last night and on the subject, and it's how do we bring more trust and openness in our president of how the money's going? There's a lot of suspicion about where that money's going constantly, and specifically the Ukrainian money, which is making people turn against supporting Ukraine, which we need to make sure they win. I have many friends, I've been in many places there. I love Ukraine.
Thank you. Thank you very much for the question. The budget transparency and accountability is my favorite question. As the former Minister of Finance, you know, when I became the deputy minister in 2015, and I'll get to the fight with corruption, but when we came, our previous president Yanukovych, who was super corrupt. I mean, before 2013, the corruption in Ukraine was systemic, and the fight with it was sporadic. And I was in business, and I know how difficult it was to have business when you are honest and don't want to pay bribes and don't pay bribes. But then when we had Revolution of Dignity and Yanukovych and all his clique fled to Russia, and we started rebuilding the country literally from scratch. There was a day in 2014 when we had equivalent of it was 10,000 euros, so like approximately $12,000 to $14,000 on the single treasury account of the country. The country was robbed blind. Our debt to GDP was 83%. Our public deficit was 10%. When I left as the Minister of Finance and fiscal consolidation was my key priority, our debt to GDP was below 50%, and our public deficit was, the budget deficit was below 2%. Now, that didn't make me a particular popular finance minister, because it means you cut down all the expenditures, you make them very targeted, you only give subsidies to those who really need it. But that was the right thing to do, and that made our economy and budget sphere very sustainable. But also we focused on fighting with corruption in several ways. So what did we do even before the full-fledged war started? I started the initiative, and we opened all our expenditures and revenues. You actually can go online, and you can see everything that we spent yesterday. All our expenditures are open to the public. That was a very difficult project to do, but we opened it in 2015, and we never closed even during the war, only a highly classified expenditures. You will not see that level of transparency in many countries. Second, we started putting together the accountability, and we introduced the inspector generals together with some of the help, and our accounting chamber and everything else, and audits. And that creates a much better system of accountability. Third, we started fighting with a high-level corruption. How did we do that? First, we decided to fight with or shrink the areas where corruption was widespread. First, the gas and oil sector corruption. That was, we called it the president's corruption, because it was the Russian gas, which was sold through subsidiaries together with previous Ukrainian presidents. And there was, all of them were becoming billionaires and oligarchs. The whole class of oligarchs grew on that. So we demonopolized that area. We created supervisory boards in many of the state companies, and some of them were privatized. And the most important thing, we went into the market prices for gas. Because before, all gas prices were subsidized. People were getting cheap gas. The state was subsidizing them to oligarchs. And that's why the whole thing was very corrupt. Now, that system was completely changed by a number of pro-reform governments which we had. And frankly, because that means we had to increase the gas prices for population, that also doesn't make a lot of governments popular. In order to fight with corruption, we created the anti-corruption agencies from scratch. In addition, because again, the free and fair judiciary is the basis to fight with any inefficiencies, and we did not have that. We had a hand-me-down from Soviet Union, which was infected with massive corruption in these areas when Russia dominated everywhere, and with oligarchs who were buying whole ministries and judges and prosecutors. So in the law enforcement, while reforming the traditional law enforcement, we created the whole new infrastructure, National Anti-Corruption Bureau. It's the investigative bureau that investigates high-level corruption. We created National Anti-Corruption Prosecutors, which only present those cases on high-level official corruption, and also Anti-Corruption Court. And actually, that system works. I mean, it's still, of course, it's only 6 years that we have it, but that's the system that indicted our Chief Justice. And he's out of his position, and he was arrested, and now it will take some time, of course, and again, we have to say alleged corrupt judge, because, due process of law, and he has to be convicted by, but, even the Chief Justice in Ukraine is not out of reach for this system. Now, not everything is ideal, of course, and it's a work in progress, but we are very devoted, and as President Zelensky says, the zero tolerance to corruption. You probably can never get to zero corruption. Any country has to fight with it, but zero tolerance to corruption is very important. And for people of Ukraine who fight on the front line, and I'm sure you meet with people when you travel to Ukraine, who say stealing from the budget now is treason. When people are paying with their lives for Ukraine, how can you do something like this? Now, with the support from the United States, in 4 supplementary budgets, 113 approximately billion that were in these supplementary budgets. Out of them, 65 billion are dedicated to Ukraine. Out of 65 billion dedicated to Ukraine, approximately 23 billion is the budget support, which went into the budget accounts. It goes through the trust fund of the World Bank, Treasury Trust Fund of the World Bank, and then into the accounts of the Ministry of Finance. It's a very certain accounts which it can be used for, like salaries to teachers, salaries to healthcare providers, payments to the IDPs, the internally displaced people who need support. Those we can trace to literally last names, and we do them digitally through our DIA system. We're 20 million already, so we check whether people really moved from Kharkiv to somewhere and eligibility criteria. We report on those money literally on a daily basis. It's a very transparent mechanism. I sent, in addition to the reports to the Treasury, which is sent, audited by Deloitte, checked by 3 inspector generals from Pentagon, from State Department, and from USAID. I also sent a kind of budget by budget reports to everyone on the Hill. I wish all our internal programs were as controlled and transparent like that. And you can read the reports from the inspector generals on this. They're open for the public. Very long and boring, of course, but for finance people interested, you will not find that something was either misused or... Now, on the weapon side, like this 45 billion that was allocated already to Ukraine for the defense, we did not get the money. The money stays here, whether it's the presidential drawdown from your stocks or the purchasing of the equipment and orders to the companies, that all goes to American companies here in more than 30 states, and we get the weapons. And these weapons, then we use LogFast system, it's called. It's a NATO standard system on the tracking of each equipment. So frankly, for every Javelin or for every piece of the shell, we can trace how it got into the country, and then all the links of how it got to the battlefield, to when it was used, who used it, and stuff like that. That, of course, is classified, but we're reporting it back. Now, one of the last reports by the Inspector General from Pentagon said that US does not control it all the way until to the battlefield, which we would welcome if US would control it all the way to the battlefield. It's just that your military is not present at the battlefield, and that's a choice. You have your defense attaches at the embassy, but not all the way to the battlefield, and we would welcome it. I mean, that's where we actually, the more transparency we can have there, we would welcome it, because it not only is the right thing to do, but it also helps us. So I think Putin getting more of this information to Americans, saying how we are doing it, and again, I can assure everyone that we are open to as much transparency and fight with corruption there, I think might help to explain to people how we're using it. So that's on the side of people who really want to know about it. I mean, there is a lot we can show there. Now, there is, of course, some propaganda you probably saw on, like, I'm not on TikTok, but, you know, my monitoring sends me, like, Zelensky is buying yachts, or, I mean, First Lady is buying jewelry. I mean, pure fakes and propaganda. And, of course, we have to fight with it too. But it's very difficult to fight with something that is, like, complete outright lie, and it doesn't matter how much time I will say this is not true, you know, like no, Zelensky does not buy yachts, you know, he didn't. Everything that he has is reflected in his public declaration. Oh, by the way, that's another thing that Ukraine has, which is pretty unique. You know, all officials here submit disclose their assets and income in this public declarations, but we actually do it publicly. You can go online and check everything I earned or I spent on what I own publicly.
I have a quick follow-up.
Yes.
We had energy independence here.
I'd like to get some students to ask, and I think we only have like a couple minutes. We have 5 minutes left. Was that? Okay.
We'll exchange contact, and I would be happy to continue.
Hey, привіт, як ти?
Дуже добре, дякую.
My grandmother's from Chernivtsi.
Ah,
Unfortunately, I say this because I'm going to be asking a tough question. Unfortunately.
go ahead.
So Andrzej Duda said that the president of Poland said that Russian can be fought cheaply because American soldiers are not dying. And then in August, and then in April of 2022, there were supposed to be peace talks. And then a NATO official says, we're not doing it, we don't want peace. And 500,000 Ukrainian men have already died, and the age has gone down from 27 to 25. And I say this all to say, because I don't believe without NATO help, or without NATO manpower, Ukraine has a manpower to defeat Russia. So my question is, do you believe that NATO is sacrificing Ukraine in order to weaken Russia?
The short answer to that is no, and I will expand why. So first, when Russia suggested so-called negotiations or peace talks, they were not peace talks. But for us not to be, first of all, NATO was not involved in that at all, and they did not tell us anything. But President Zelensky right away sent a very high-level delegation from us so that Russians will not spend propaganda that Ukrainians don't want peace. So even though we knew they are not interested to negotiate, we sent a group of delegates to have those peace talks. I mean, I've seen all the readouts. Of course, not all of them I can discuss publicly now, but the position from Russia was surrender and we'll spare you. You know, they never negotiated in good faith. Essentially, the people who they sent, first of all, look at the level of the people they sent. They probably did not see Putin for 10 years before they even went. But the majority, like, they came and they said, we will kill all of you, so surrender. That was that, of course, I mean, we went to Istanbul, we went to Minsk, we went to a couple of places to negotiate, but it was clear that, you know, there was not even a negotiation. But we have created the Ukraine's peace formula. President Zelensky suggested this peace formula so that we are ready to negotiate the peace based on UN standards and UN rules. And this 10-step peace formula is exactly like on territorial integrity, on sovereignty, on justice, on nuclear, and everything else. Now, of course, I wish we received more weapons and faster. Of course, I wish the sanctions, and that's a very important element of that, was there and faster. And look, I think we can win. If there are more weapons, I mean, the small Soviet type of army can never win against large Soviet type of army. But we are no longer Soviet type of army. And the fact that we were able to liberate 50% of our territories, the fact that with just Ukrainian naval drones, there is not a single Western participation in that new capability. We were able to destroy or damage 1/3 of Russian Black Sea fleet. A country that doesn't have the fleet destroyed 1/3 of Black Sea fleet, and we don't even need to beg Russians anymore indirectly when UN and Turkey negotiated the grain corridor with them. We have the grain corridor now, which we created, our defenders created. Now, I'm not saying it's going to be easy, but if we have asymmetric capabilities, if we can focus now on longer range missiles, and if our friends will provide us in sufficient quantity, if we will use more of the drones, and now Ukraine is not only testing, but actually on the battlefield using more than 100 new platforms, the majority of them which are Ukrainian developed, and the naval drones and others. And if we pair that and we attack the logistic and supply chains and Crimean stations and the Kerch Bridge, and we pair it with tougher sanctions, for example, sanction all Russian banks, which still, out of 326 Russian banks, only 55 are under full blocking sanctions by the US. Let's sanction all of them. Let's prevent Russia from still selling so much oil and gas to other countries like China and India and so many places. So there is a lot we can do, and if we do it together on sanctions and weapons front, we will see what we saw in 2022, when we surprised everyone by how fast we are retaking territories and winning. So no, it's possible. You know, small David can still win over large and ugly Goliath. It will just take more creativity, more effort, and all of us to stay the course, you know, as military people say. So thank you. It's not a difficult, it's a very valid question. But, you know, the situation is, yes, Russia is big and brutal. But what other choice do we have? We don't have, huh? Peace. Oh, nobody wants peace more than Ukraine. We want peace, but as you know, President Reagan rightfully said when he was talking about Soviet Union, peace is only possible through strength. You know, if you are in a dark alley and a murderer and rapist caught you there, and he already is, right over you, when you come to that situation and you see something like this, do you tell person, oh, let him cut your right arm or left arm, maybe you will survive without it? No, you call the police, you join the fight, you do whatever you need to do in order to save the person. This is where we are, you know, look, they are already in our house. We cannot leave our people behind. If Russia stops today, there will be no war. That's how we get to peace. If we stop now, there will be no Ukraine. They will kill all of us. And we've seen what happens. You know, again, my address is Yablunska Street. That's the very famous street in Bucha and Vorzel. This is the street where the majority of houses were damaged and full street, you know, you saw the pictures with, I know from my neighbors what happens there. I have videos on my phone with the bodies of my neighbors lying on the street because the Russians didn't allow even to bury them. This is a genocide, and if we fight, we at least have a chance of surviving. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much. Please join me in thanking Ambassador Markarova for being with us today.
Thank you. Thank you for being with us. Thank you.
Thank you to everyone who joined us today. Just a quick ask as you leave. Please exit through those doors if you would. Thank you.
what I knew about these topics came from the media, which portrays drug addicts and prisoners as reckless, scary, and reprehensible. It's safe to say I was not prepared for this dark awakening that would soon come. In education classes and in the field working with children, we hear tragic stories of households hurting from substance use. Rescuing children from these situations is often defined by placing them in foster care or by parents receiving jail sentences, as if tearing families apart is a success. In getting these children help, one question is frequently neglected. What about the parents? What about the mother or father that is bound by the ties of substance abuse beyond their control? That just potentially lost the right to watch their own child grow up, that are about to be sentenced behind bars for being sick, for being sick. At my internship, I've heard stories from people that have experienced real traumas. Many have experienced physical or emotional abuse, discrimination, and social injustice. Past experiences like these rewired the human brain, which is highly associated with addiction, as their reward system is damaged. Addiction is not a choice. It is not a lack of self-control. It is a chronic brain disease that requires treatment. The widespread effects of addiction should not be undermined. However, the only way we can begin to heal families and societies hurt by addiction is to target the illness at its source. Addicts are not their disease. They are people with families, goals, and passions which can be realized through dedicated treatment and an educated support system. By debunking the stigma around substance abuse, we become that support system. Thank you. Okay, next up we're going to hear from Micaiah Hall.
Hi, my name is Micaiah Hall, and I wanted to talk about the gentleman's sport. When I was a kid, I grew up in Florida. And in Florida, we lived in this cul-de-sac. And I was a middle child, so I played by myself a lot. I went outside, and we had these really short palm trees, these really long sticks. And I'd break a stick off, and I'd go around in circles, and pretend that I was King Arthur, or Zorro, or my favorite, my name is Micaiah Hall. You killed my father. And I would play by myself, go in circles. I just love swords. Any movie with swords, any cartoon with swords, I was just fascinated with it. Then I grew up. I went to middle school and forgot about swords. Then I went to high school and got depressed. I came to college and got depressed and hungry. And I had my partner, and she was like, you know you really like swords, you should take a fencing class. I was like, fencing? I don't know fencing class. But I did. I signed up for it. Reluctantly, but I did. And I met Kenny, who was a fencing coach for the class. And Kenny showed us how to play swords, but they were actually pull moves. So I felt like I was using the sticks again. I could feel the inner child in me lighting up. And then he allowed us to put on the actual gear and hold the actual sword and actually stab people. And this was very exciting because now it wasn't imaginary friends, but fellow classmates. So I took the class for 2 semesters, and I went up to Kenny's club, and I fenced against
stop that job at the end of the summer to pursue some other things. But one of the best things I've learned from that job is that these kids are much more similar to me than I thought they would. Growing up, I had a lot of stigmas surrounding that area of, that disorder of autism. And luckily, when I got that job, those stigmas started to break down because I got to see the lives that these kids live. And without breaking any rules of the job, I'd like to talk about a kid, won't state, but when he was younger, he was diagnosed with autism. For a couple of years, he lived a pretty normal life. He was pretty high functioning. And at one point in his life, he got this streptococcus disease. And instead of it being in the throat, it entered his brain. And streptococcus in the brain starts to deteriorate membranes in the brain. And this will set kids back years and years and years. He started to have manic episodes. He started to do things just to make his mom mad. He'd put things in piles at his house and urinate on them just to make his mom mad. And imagine as a parent seeing your kid for 6 years of his life be completely functioning, and at some point when he got the disease, it just all broke down. And it's a funny story now, and I've talked to his mom about it. But one night he crawled out of the second-story window and jumped off onto the driveway, and I said, "Mom, that'd be super scary." But something I've seen and I've got told him since I started the job, is I begin to see him make a complete 180. His words begin to flow much easier. He's able to take himself to the bathroom. He's able to make his own food. But this is just something that I'd like to share with everybody. Yeah, that's it.
All right, next up we're going to hear from Caleb Sheath. All right, we're going to skip Caleb, he's not here right now. We're going to go to Kate Skilbreath.
Nothing matters ever, and let me tell you why. We are small, insignificant beings in a 13-billion-year-old universe on a spinning rock through the sky. We, as humans, make up 0.007% of Earth's history on this planet, and you are one of 8 billion people alive on this planet today. But the chances of you being born are 1 in 400 trillion. So maybe the big picture things don't matter at all. Maybe what's out of our control is out of our control, and that is that. Maybe it's actually the little things that matter. The little things every single day that we can impact to make a difference for ourselves and those around us. So be nice, talk to people, have fun, tell people that you love them if you do, or that you appreciate them a lot and think that they're wonderful. Make connections, talk to strangers, make them friends, make more friends, introduce these friends, bridge communities, strengthen them, and create bonds. Be vulnerable, open up to people, be honest and open and unique and truly yourself. Apologize when needed, forgive and move on. Talk to the birds and the bees and the flowers and the trees. Go and touch rocks and snow and grass. Make meals and share them. Talk to your neighbors. Wave to the bus driver. Sing in the shower. And call your mother. We have an opportunity on this planet in our small time in it to make it a better place for ourselves and those of us around us. So be nice, talk to people, tell them that you love them if you do, because maybe, just maybe, it's the little things that matter, and we have the opportunity to decide what those are. Thank you.
All right, next up we're going to hear from Maya, O teacher. shift society away and their attitudes away from where it is currently and move it towards empathy and action. So homelessness is a multifaceted issue. It's much more than just a lack of shelter. It is currently and forever been, it has been a systematic failure. So let's go into some logistics. Over 600,000 individuals are homeless. And this affects children, this affects single parents, elderly, and so many more. Because homelessness is not discriminized. And in Utah alone, 12,000 individuals are homeless. And in different places such as New York, that goes all the way to 60,000. So how does society respond to this? Well, too often it's inadequate shelters, it's subpar support, and when there's no support, the void is palpable. So, now that the is palpable. Sorry, can I focus for a second here? Okay, so in conclusion, what we need to do as a group is view homeless individuals differently. We need to support policy changes. We need to affirm the dignity of all individuals because they deserve our time and compassion to correct societal ailments. And the dehumanization of individuals that do not meet our social standards needs to change because they are not hopeless, they are simply homeless. Thank you so much for your time.
All right, and the next we are going to hear from Jay Chowdhury.
Hello everybody, my name is Jay Shari, and today I'm going to be talking about my vision for the future. A future where rich dreams can thrive and cross borders, in which every individual has the opportunity to thrive and succeed. As a first-generation student with immigrant parents, my father worked tirelessly, laboring in and laboring out, dedicated to his work, which became the bedrock to which upon our dreams could thrive. Meanwhile, my mother, with her unwavering love and support, nurtured me and my younger brother, instilling with us the value of perseverance and compassion. As I grew up, I always stumbled upon the question, what will you be when you grow up? Like many of my peers, the answer wasn't always clear-cut. But what I've come to realize is that our dreams exceed borders and boundaries. In a world where diversity is celebrated and inclusivity is the norm, every individual, regardless of their background or circumstances, should have the potential to fulfill their potentials and passions. Whether we aspire to be doctors, engineers, artists, or activists, our dreams are valid, and our dreams exceed borders and boundaries. As students, we stand on a steep cliff of endless opportunities, and it's up to us to take those opportunities and forge a path that reflects our values and compassion. Let us all together dream big, break down barriers, and create a world in which every individual has the opportunity to thrive and succeed. Thank you.
Next, we're going to hear from Rebecca Trejo.
Hi, I'm 22 years old, and I am nearly 6 figures in medical debt. That number will only continue to climb as a transplant patient, cancer survivor, and chronically ill American citizen. This story rings true for millions of Americans across the country. And the chronically ill face this problem at a disproportionate rate, as 1/3 of chronically ill patients have medical debt. The 2021 census found that 20% of families are facing medical debt, and similarly, nearly half of all bankruptcies in this country are tied to medical issues. Not only that, but we see that every transplant center in this nation requires that before you qualify for a transplant, you have to be able to prove you can pay. That's ranging from $400,000 for a kidney to a maximum of $1.3 million for a heart. I know it sounds hard to believe, but it happened to me here at the University of Utah Hospital. They said, you have to prove you can pay $900,000. And we said, and if we can't? They said, then she dies. That was the gist. The chronically ill and the disabled are forgotten by the able body because it's not something that we think about very often. But all it takes is one accident for you to wake up with your prior abilities gone and your pockets literally completely dried. A health affairs study found that 1/3 of cancer patients have medical debt in default, while 3% are filing for bankruptcy. The United States government has not only an obligation, but a moral duty to create accommodations for those who are seeking frequent medical care in order to survive. But they also have the burden of protecting every single American citizen. And I speak for millions of Americans when I say that I have not and never have and will not feel protected. As we hear so often, everybody has the right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, but those unalienable rights are being passively removed from your disabled community with extreme medical bills hanging over our heads just to exist. Thank you.
Okay, and next up we're going to hear from Sydney Pomeranz.
Hi, my name is Sydney Pomeranz, and this is a speech titled Apple Pie. I hate apple pie. I don't know why, because I really like a good buttery, flaky crust, vanilla ice cream, cinnamony, warm filling. I like them separately, but you put them together and it makes me want to gab. And I'm a true American citizen, a real patriot. I love classic Americana, but I hate apple pie. And everywhere I go, I wonder if people can see the bourbon on my shoulders and the cinnamon in my pockets. Because the truth is, I was born and bred to make the country's finest apple pie. Light skin, light eyes. Going to college, a tendency towards breaking cycles. I am the embodiment of a true baker of apple pie. And yet, I hate it. I find myself waking up at 4 o'clock in the morning just to make sure that I still have a supply of apple pie. I keep a slice in my pocket every time I go to the doctor's appointments, just to be told everything will be fixed with birth control. I have a slice on me every time I'm told that affordability is just around the corner, that equality exists. I hate apple pie. I want to believe that there's other desserts out there, cookies, truffles, brownies, but I've never had them, and I'm not qualified to bake them. And I'm tired of being told that I'm wasting my privilege because I hate apple pie. There has to be something out there that tastes better. Why is the best dessert on the possible menu my least favorite? What about just desserts? The kind that everybody has access to. Something that I'm not obligated to bake. Something that others aren't obligated to beg for, but rather something new, something creative, something that makes me more than the embodiment of Americana, than the first in a generation to go to college. Something better than apple pie. Thank you.
All right, next up is Max Lepore.
Hi, my name is Max Lepore, and this speech is called Working Class Representation. In America, we claim to strive for equality for all. And in doing so, we have made some progress in increasing the representation for both women and racial ethnic minorities in Congress in recent years. However, one group we have failed to increase such representation for is the American working class. According to data from political scientist Nicholas Carnes, the working class has made up more than 50% of our country's population since the start of the 20th century, but consistently less than 2% of Congress. And on the flip side, millionaires make up less than 9% of our country's population today, but they hold a majority in Congress. This under and overrepresentation matters. According to research done by Carnes, as well as research that I have done in furtherance of his work, We have both found that members of Congress who come from the working class tend to vote on economic issues in ways that better coincide with general views that have been displayed by the working class. By having the perspectives of this social group, these members of Congress are better able to represent them. However, they also find their bills would be killed off at extraordinarily high rates. With the lack of working class support in Congress, it's really, really hard to achieve working class outcomes. With all this in mind, it should come to no one's surprise that lower income Americans are more likely to distrust our government, and today, congressional approval ratings are at historic lows. However, we can fix these problems. Research has found that increasing representation for historically underrepresented groups helps members of those groups to see democratic representation and decision-making as being more legitimate. As such, we need to elect more working class candidates to Congress. Not only will this improve our government's focus on the working class and the issues that are important to them, but also the dismal views that everyday Americans feel toward our government. For a country that claims to strive for equality for all, we face a choice. We can continue to elect an exclusive government that serves the rich and elite, or we can start to elect a representative government that serves all Americans. We must make the right choice. Thank you.
Okay, and next up we're going to hear from Sahel Kaur. So sorry.
Knowledge is a key to Knowledge is a key to open the women's potential, while education is one of the pathway to her limitless possibilities. Ladies and gentlemen, I stand before you to address one of the critical issues that affects life of millions of women around the world, the lack of access to education. While we celebrate the progress made in countries like the United States where education is widely accessible, we cannot ignore the harsh reality faced by the countless women around the world. In various parts of the world, women are still denied the basic fundamental right to education. They are told that the place is not in the classroom, but rather in the confines of their home. This injustice not only hinders their potential, but it also hampers the growth of entire community and society. Well, education is one of the most important and the powerful tool which we can really use to empower women. It unlocks the door, breaks the barrier, and opens the world full of opportunities. It's important to acknowledge the fundamental truth that women are not less than men. They are deserving, they are thriving, and they're thriving for every opportunity. We must advocate for all the policies. We must that ensure the equal opportunity for women. We really need to support the organizations and initiatives that work tirelessly for the support of women, such as Mala Yousafzai, Mala's Fern and Girls Rising, and otherwise there can be social awareness even too. So as we gather here today, let us be the hope for those who are silenced, and the voice for those who are oppressed, and the catalyst for the change in the world. Thank you.
Okay, and next we are going to hear from Luke Larson again.
Thank you. My name is Luke Larson, and this is I Will. Growing up, I used to dream with my eyes open, and I started to imagine the life I could create for myself. At an early age, I knew that I wanted to make a difference and create positive change. I knew that going to school was how I was going to get there and give that to myself and to others. I remember how innocent school used to be, and I remember when I became scared of it. I still remember the names I was called and the group of boys that waited outside of my classroom. I still remember the fear that clenched my heart and the dread of stepping into the building every day. I didn't even know what the word gay meant. And threats from those I was told who I was before I even knew for myself. And I had to grow up a lot faster than I thought. I spend hours every day working on coursework and studying for exams just to step into a career that's heteronormative. 4 out of 5 LGBTQ adults reported that they take at least one action to prevent workplace discrimination. That includes hiding their romantic relationship. This entire time, I've been dreaming of escaping that same culture just to dive right back into it. My perception and the fear of it, it's not all that different now being in college and moving on to my career. My community dies every day due to hate or pressure from others around them. And despite all the pressure to conform or be angry with the society that I was born into, I'm not going to let anybody tell me who I'm supposed to be. I'm not going to ask for acceptance or respect ever again. I will demand it. Thank you.
Great. Next up, we're going to hear from Ty Martinez.
My piece is called An Open Letter to No One.
Dear no one, I am 2,000 miles away from home in a room full of strangers meant to be my peers, keeping track of every question I'm asked and every pitch I have to make of myself. What's your name? What's your major? Where are you from? Who are you working for? Waiting for something more. And then I heard, what kind of music do you like? And no one, from nowhere, got me to look up. Like a perfectly captured memory in my mind, full of dangers of nostalgia and personal bias. And although it's a silly phase I'm going through, when I talk about no one, I have nothing but good things to say. No one is amazing. You would love no one. No one is funny. No, hilarious, kind, compassionate, interesting, intense, important. I'm baking these for no one. They're her favorite. No one has the best music taste I've ever encountered, outside of my own, of course. And no one is just my really, 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 really beautiful friend. No one often wears pink and black, though once wore green. No one never forgets the little things. Names, favorites, pitches. No one understands. No one never speaks without intent, though makes fun of me, the opposite. And although no one makes fun of me and claims I stole her music taste, which I did, no one is amazing. Although I do not know no one, that random Thursday night, 2,000 miles away from home, plagues my mind. Full of dangers and nostalgia, but like a perfect song, I know all the words to. One that I play day after day after day. It is beautiful, nevertheless. Sincerely, someone. Thank you.
And next, we're going to hear from Riley Hertzberg.
Hi, my name is Riley Hertzberg, and I'm going to talk about the hypocrisy of censorship. A call for censorship is the cry of the hypocrite. When an individual uses their voice to express themselves, but then subsequently requests, if not demands, that someone else abstain from doing so themselves, they're guilty of hypocrisy. Alarmingly, such a call not only demonstrates doubt in, but also the dismantling of critical thought, which is rather ironic given the lack of critical thought on the part of the hypocrite. You see, we all have the capacity to hear a wide array of ideas and ideologies and then subsequently decide in accordance with our personal values what attitudes we will support and purport. We don't need some sort of authority on the basis of title, reputation, education to determine truth. If we were to look to someone with their personal biases, with their personal values and perhaps schemes to decide truth and disseminate right, then at what point are we not going to fall under a clear dictatorship? Accordingly, I believe we need to hear a wide array of attitudes in our discussions. We need to include those. You may sometimes wonder how people come to the conclusions that they do.
You may outright determine, rightfully so, that someone's ideas are based on hate or idiocy, not to say those are exclusive, of course. For instance, today I'm here questioning those who are calling for censorship. But what really matters is that we are not going to allow ourselves and our censorship to be silenced and justified. We don't want our voices to be taken away from us, and so that we are left misunderstood and misrepresented. Therefore, we should not take that opportunity away from someone else to clarify their positions and share their attitudes and beliefs. At the end of the day, it is my belief that genuine advocates of truth will want all attitudes to be included in discussion so that we in turn can be heard and understood. At the end of the day, what matters to me is that both you can hear my call for openness in our discussion, as well as the call of that insecure, hypocritical censor, and then decide what call you will cry as well. Thank you.
Okay, and then last up, we're going to hear from Guy Kelly.
Hello, my name is Guy Kelly. I've entitled this Perfecting Our Personal Algorithm. What happens often when people win the lottery? They can't hold on to their winnings. But what would happen if Jeff Bezos or Oprah Winfrey or Justice Sotomayor had all their success taken away? They would still be successful. They might not be able to replicate their extreme success, but because of their personal algorithm that they worked on over a lifetime, they'd be able to replicate that success. What is a personal algorithm? A personal algorithm is our internal decision-making process. Viktor Frankl, a Holocaust survivor, famously taught that between stimulus, or input, and response, output, is our ability to choose. And embedded in that ability to choose is our decision-making process, or our personal algorithm. An example to illustrate this concept would be simply driving down the road and getting cut off in traffic and getting angry. Getting cut off would be the stimulus or input. Getting angry would be the response or output. But the decision to get angry would be the decision-making process or our personal algorithm. A couple examples of algorithmic change that we could work on would be inefficiencies or defects in our algorithm. An inefficiency would be identifying that we study better in the morning. So instead of studying at night, we wake up early in the morning to study. A defect might be that we have a problem telling little white lies. And as we reflect, we recognize that the best way to not tell a lie is to not put ourselves in a situation where we'd be tempted to tell a lie in the first place and make that algorithmic change. Focusing on our personal algorithm is empowering because it puts the greatest focus on what we have the greatest control over, ourselves. We're not limited by our environmental conditions or our genetic predispositions. And because principles of success are universal, we realize that if we make those little incremental changes over time to our algorithm, our success becomes inevitable and our ability to succeed becomes unlimited. Thank you.
All right, awesome. Well, that was the last one, so thank you guys. I mean, if you know the other rosters want to maybe just put like this table away, put those chairs back, and put like the table that has the